Thanks very much. So, who have we got here? Hands up people who are scientists or engineers or mathematicians. Hands up. Okay, alright, okay. No. Okay, alright. Hands up people who are from the arts, from, writers of one. Two. What do you do?
English philosophy.
English philosophy, brilliant. Did you have your hand up there? What did you say?
Archivist.
Archivist, ooh. And yourself? Musician, right, okay. And then hands up everybody else who has really interesting regular jobs. That's everybody else. What do you do, sir?
Oh, I'm joking.
Well, what do you do? It has to be.
I'm retired.
You retired, but what were you?
Civil servant.
Civil servant, very good. And what do you?
Fixing the internet.
Fixing the internet, very good. Well, that's kind of scientific as well. On the other hand, there was somebody interesting here who put up their hand. Somebody...
fundraiser.
Fundraiser, very good, very good. So a nice mix, a nice blend in the room, and thank you very much for coming tonight to Pint of Science. So I think there's some great speakers lined up. So basically what's going to happen is they're going to speak for about 20 minutes. We're going to have a chance for a Q&A, and I'll basically repeat the question because I have the microphone, so don't worry about that. If I can't hear you, I'll go up to you. And I think that's the housekeeping. I have here in my hand my first year science book. I got this out of the attic last night, and I'll be referring to it from time to time. So the first thing I'd like to share with you is I just want to ask you, sir, actually, what were you doing on the 27th of November 1981? Okay, anybody else know what they were doing on the 27th of November 1981? Yes?
I was at school.
You were at school. I was at school as well. I was taking my first science test. Do you want to know what result I got?
Yeah.
94%. So based on my answers, I'm going to ask a question, anybody can answer it, and here we go. What is mass? You're not so talkative now. What is mass? Anyone?
Density.
Oh, here we go.
Times.
What is it?
Density by volume?
Density by volume.
Times.
Well, I got 94%, so mine says it's the amount of substance, and that was scratched out by the teacher, it said matter, of any object measured in grams and kilograms. You're welcome. What I got wrong was what is weight? What is weight? There is no wrong answer here because I got it wrong. What is weight?
MG. Don't know.
mg, yes.
Mass times.
Mass times gravity, very good. I have, it's the force which the Earth has for an object. I got that wrong. Okay, I'll come back to that from time to time. We'll go back into other exam questions just to kind of whet your appetite to keep you going, but thank you very much so far. So I'm going to call up the first speaker on stage, and this is Adam Murphy. He's working out in DCU, but he calls himself a turncoat physicist because he straddles the world of science, communicating and physics, don't you, Adam? Mm-hmm. And he's going to talk to us tonight. The title of his talk is 5 Pints, it's from Dinosaurs. What is it, Adam?
Pints, find a way.
Find a way. From Dinosaurs to physics. So a big, massive round of applause, please, for our first speaker, Adam.
Thank you. It's really great to be starting this festival off. Over the course of the day, you're going to hear some really insightful talks, you're going to hear some really impressive talks. You're also going to listen to me for a while. So, dinosaurs are kind of a passion of mine. They're my road not travelled, the thing I never got to do. And I think, like most people around my age, I was first interested in dinosaurs pretty much the first time I heard this. And since then, it's been something I've loved completely. Now, there's a problem when you're an amateur dinosaur lover, is you think you're Dr. Alan Grant, you think you're Sam Neill, you think you're really cool. If you're even a little more deranged, a little more like I am, you might see yourself as a very sexy Jeff Goldblum. The problem is, Ross Geller is probably much closer to the correct answer. So, like I said, you're going to be getting very nerdy all around the place, dinosaur trivia, and a little bit in the research that's going on at the moment. If you're going to take one thing away from this talk, just one thing, it's that paleontology research is insane. The stuff these people do is mental, and they come up with the weirdest ways of doing them, and I'll show you all that as we go through it. But when you're talking about dinosaurs, you've got to start a little bit with history. And the history starts with this creepy old man. This is the best picture of him I could find. This is the photo where he looks least likely to kill you and wear your skin. This is Sir Richard Owen, who is kind of a problematic favourite of mine. He coined the word dinosaur, which means terrible lizard in Greek. He's also the man who basically founded the Natural History Museum, which is one of my favourite places on earth. He also had first dibs on any carcasses that came out of London Zoo. One day his wife came home to find a dead gorilla sitting in the hallway while he was waiting to cut it up. But he was also mental and hated evolution and constantly warred with Darwin, so I have issues with whether or not I like him. The other thing you have to remember is that paleontology is, more than any other science, really kind of corrective. And you can show that with this happy fellow. This was a drawing, a kind of an imagining of something, of a few bones that were found by a fella called Gideon Mantell. He was always wrong. Because first of all, this thing that it's sitting on, it looks like a branch. But even from the few bones they had, they knew this thing was the size of an elephant. So I don't know what it's sitting on. When he got this, first of all, he wanted to call it Iguanosaurus, which would mean iguana lizard. And then one of his colleagues came up to him and pointed out, Gideon, an iguana is already an iguana lizard, so you can't really call it that. So he decided, okay, so we called it Iguanodon, which means iguana-like. So we're already wrong twice, and for the third time, this thing here on its forehead, he found a bone and he called it a horn. What this thing actually looks like is this. And the horn is how it gives a thumbs up. The horn is a spike that attaches to its thumb. So Gideon really needed to get his head in the game. But it brings us on to another point, which is, what is a dinosaur? That's a dinosaur. But what makes up a dinosaur? Because you get these kind of things, these flying dinosaurs. These are not dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't fly. If it flew, it wasn't a dinosaur. Even this thing here, this is Quetzalcoatlus. This thing was a giant, flying, angry giraffe that preyed on whatever it could find. This thing also wasn't a dinosaur. So we move on to the swimming things like Nessie. This is a plesiosaur. Also not a dinosaur. But there is some interesting work going into figuring out how these things swim, because they're the only animals really in history that had front limbs for swimming and back limbs for swimming. And
Sure.
I'm just going to yell now actually I can probably just yell.
Okay, that's fine.
Just to show you some work that's going on with plesiosaur locomotion, I have these two bears. This is Ted and this is Ed. So there was a group that wanted to find out how these things could swim. Could they swim like sea lions? Could they even do that kind of thing? So they put through computer models, and then they decided computer models just weren't enough. We need to humiliate people as much as we can. So they got a pair of swimmers, and one guy swam that way and wrapped his legs around the belly, and I'm not kidding, around the belly of another fella, and then the two of them would try and swim along and see what way they could swim through the water. And these are two male bears because a man and a woman can never make a plesiosaur. So they found out, somehow they managed to find out doing this, that a plesiosaur couldn't have swam like a sea lion. Or it couldn't have swam, I don't know how, but they figured this out, and it agrees with computer models. They also found out that it could have swam like a dolphin. It had to paddle along, both legs, all the limbs, flipping independently of one another. That's how a plesiosaur had to swim. And this is the first foray into current research in paleontology, which I love so very much. But anyway, it brings us back to what is a dinosaur. Again, it's paleontology, it doesn't fully make sense. There's arguments, constant, unending arguments about what makes a dinosaur. But in general, it has to be a reptile, it has to stay on land, and it has to walk with its 4 feet underneath it. Not like a crocodile, not spread out that way. That's basically a dinosaur, kind of, until you get into the arguments. But this is definitely a dinosaur. This is Velociraptor, the scary one from Jurassic Park. That's mostly a dinosaur. In case you haven't noticed, a lot of this talk involves ragging on Jurassic Park. Because the problem with Velociraptor is Velociraptor was actually covered in feathers, and it was about the size of a turkey. People use this to say why you shouldn't be like, why would I be scared of that? Look how small it is. These people have never met geese. I would be afraid of that. But the thing is, there is a but. There is a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to Velociraptor. That animal is based on a real animal. It's based on an animal called Deinonychus. The problem with that, the reason why Spielberg decided not to use it, is because Deinonychus is hard to say. And it's even harder to spell. So you might actually get down to the right one. But Deinonychus is about the right size. It's almost person-sized. And the key thing, it has the big scary claws the Velociraptor had. It had those as well, so it could cut people open. Again though, covered in feathers. So a little less scary that way. When you're talking about dinosaurs, when you're talking about dinosaurs, you move up, related to this one, you have to talk about how Velociraptor, how smart it was. That was the thing. Clever girl. Except it wasn't. Probably wasn't that clever. Probably about as clever as an ostrich. But what would have been one of the cleverer dinosaurs was this one. This one called Troodon. It had a bigger brain for an animal of its size should have, and more importantly, its eyes were like ours. They both faced forward, instead of, say, cows and horses, which have eyes going that way. Generally, binocular vision that way is a prerequisite for higher intelligence. So that would have been more. But this thing isn't scary. This thing went around stealing eggs from proto-chickens. Not exactly a terrifying land monster. But you got to talk about T-Rex. T-Rex, king of the tyrant lizards, is what it means in Greek. It weighed from about 4 tons to about 8 tons. Is generally considered to have the strongest bite force of any animal that has ever lived. But the thing people always forget about T-Rex, no matter how terrifying it is, anything like that, people remember that T-Rex had a big head and tiny little arms. If you ever feel sad, just imagine a T-Rex trying to make a bed. You know, if you're happy and clap your There have been 8 really good specimens discovered. The biggest one was quite nicely called Sue. And there's a fella, a researcher in England called Phil Manning. I'll be coming back to him in a few minutes, but every 6 months him and his group go to a dig in North Dakota and they go looking for things. And he was walking with a man who has excavated more T-Rexes than anyone else. But he's never found one. Other people have found them and he's done the grunt work. And the two of them were walking along this sand lot in North Dakota, and Phil Manning just kind of looked at the bone and said, "That's a big carnivore's leg bone." At which point the guy beside him just went, "It's another T-Rex I haven't found," and walked back to the hotel. Well, that didn't work. Now this is the other one you see. This is a Firefly. This is the pilot watch. And he's playing with a Stegosaurus and a T-Rex. This is something you see fairly frequently. T-Rex and Stegosaurus fighting, duking it out. There's even this scene from Fantasia, which is the Land Before Time bit, where there's a very angry Stegosaurus fighting a T-Rex. The problem with this is, there is a greater gap between Stegosaurus disappearing and T-Rex appearing than there is between T-Rex disappearing and us appearing. That's how long dinosaurs kind of ruled the earth. I love that. It just shows you the span and the different kinds of animals that they could be. But eventually, they were killed. The most likely explanation is that an asteroid landed. That asteroid kicked dirt up into the air, which blocked out the sun. By blocking out the sun, the plants couldn't grow. When the plants couldn't grow, the plant eaters all died, which meant the meat eaters had nothing left to eat. The only things that could survive were the little things that could feed off garbage, i.e. us. Today we still do it. But there's an interesting theory that came out that I found about a couple of days ago, and love, because it makes no sense on the face of it, which is that dark matter killed the dinosaurs. Bear with me, because it does start to make sense. Around Earth, kind of out past Pluto, there's a whole bunch of rocks just flying about. And this whole bunch of rocks is the Kuiper belt, and beyond that you have another set called the Oort cloud. There's a theory there's not just theory, there's data that says the amount of asteroids that come in from the Oort cloud, kind of goes up and down through time. Loads arrive and then very few arrive, and then loads arrive and then very few arrive. And a group of people did the maths, and if we pass near dark matter as we're going around the galaxy, it could explain kicking out asteroids from here, which could explain why it was more likely that one hit the dinosaurs. Which is why apparently it makes sense that dinosaurs were killed by dark matter. I'm going to emphasize that theory is not widely accepted. It's just one of my favourites. What have we got? Oh yeah, so dinosaurs became birds eventually. That's accepted. Even the class of animals called Dinosauria is now accepted to include birds. So, and some people think that's funny that a Velociraptor turned into a chicken. But I think it makes sense when you look at this thing. This thing is called a cassowary. It doesn't look like much, and it's only about that big, about half the height of a person. But it can ram into people with the thing on its head, and the claws on its feet have killed more than one person. I'm not kidding. And it is yet another, if you didn't need enough, it is another reason to stay the hell out of Australia. Because that is the only place it lives, thankfully. Now it's going to focus much more on current research going on in this kind of thing. Something I found today, I wish I could get a photo in time, but I only found this today. We talked about how figuring out how dinosaurs move didn't make sense. That theme continues. There was a group who wanted to figure out how TRex moved. So what they did was they quite reasonably realised they didn't have any TRex to make move. So they got a load of chickens, because bird, dinosaur, yeah.
That's what they said in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, exactly. Grant. So then they got these, and they got a plunger. And they stuck plungers onto the arses of chickens. And made the chickens walk down. And what's great is the chickens actually do start to stumble T-Rexily down through the enclosure, looking all very confused. But this is it, constant theme. Paleontology research doesn't make sense. Make people swim like Plesiosaurs. Dark matter killed the dinosaurs. Take that from this talk if you take nothing else. But there is one thing that was found, this is earlier this year, is that dragons are real. This thing is real. This is an artist's reconstruction of an animal that was found. It's a dinosaur that's kind of in the same family as T-Rex and Velociraptor, but it had these bat-like wings on the front of it. It's called Ichi, which means strange wing, because, yeah, that makes sense. And basically what it means is that Khaleesi is coming to Westeros. And she is coming eventually. Not that big. This thing has nothing to do with bats, nothing to do with birds. It developed this entirely independent of those. But it's cute. Now the other one, this is the greatest puzzle in kid paleontology, is what colour were dinosaurs? No, Mum, I cannot use the purple marker if T-Rex wasn't purple. So, a group, this Phil Manning guy I mentioned earlier, decided he wanted to fix that. He wanted to know what colour dinosaurs were. But he couldn't do that straight away. But he got a fossil of a bird. The bird with the first bird to ever have a developed beak. It's called Confuciusornis, because names. And what he did was he took this fossil and he stuck it in a machine that's called a synchrotron. A synchrotron is it's a lot like the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland. It's very similar to that. You've got this ring around here, and in that ring they pump electrons, so parts of an atom. Really hope this works. And then it takes those and it spins them around as fast as it can. Much faster than this, millions of times faster than this. And the thing about that is, when you spin electrons that quickly, they start to give out X-rays. Really, really high-end, really powerful X-rays. And they come out at offshoots. That way, that way, that way, that way. So he got a fossil, and he stuck it at the end, and he blasted X-rays at this fossil of a bird. And he watched what happens. And different chemicals react to these X-rays in very different ways. Depending on what elements are in the fossils, they'll take in the X-rays and they'll absorb and they'll emit a different kind of X-ray. It's a very similar mechanism to how glow-in-the-dark animals work. Take in light, re-emit it in a different way. And what he found was, he found this setup. Jesus bird. This is the image of where the X-rays were absorbed by a certain thing. And what he was able to work out was this certain thing is a chemical. a very specific chemical. A chemical that in birds today always means the same thing. That chemical in birds today always means black. So what he was able to work out from this is that that bird was probably black. This bird that lived before numerous times before humanity existed, people could work out that this bird was black. I think that's really cool. And I'm going to leave you. I'm going to end it with this picture here: the Brachiosaurus playing in water. Because you see, the thing about it is, water is pretty much constant. You can put it in beer, you can take it out of beer, but it kind of remains the same. It's the same hydrogen, the same oxygen put together. It doesn't really change. Plants take in some of it and break it up for photosynthesis. But about 60% of the water that was around when the dinosaurs were is still around today. Which means all the water in the pints you're all drinking right now has probably been drunk by at least one dinosaur. Cheers.
Do we have any bursting questions for Adam? Anyone got any questions for him? I have one. Where did your fascination for dinosaurs begin? How young were you?
When did Jurassic Park come out?
Was it the 21st of November 1981?
Oh, of course! 7 years before I was born. I was 5.
You were 5. So why didn't you go into paleontology?
Oh, because I wanted to go into biology when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because you gotta go to biology before you can go to paleontology. And blood is icky. And biology involves dissecting things.
Yeah.
Physics is not icky and doesn't involve dissecting things. So I picked physics.
And how do you keep your love affair with dinosaurs going? Apart from obviously talking to us tonight about amazing things.
Literally every documentary I can get my hands on. There's also, do you know that feeling you get when you start looking up something relevant on Wikipedia and 6 hours later you're looking at something completely different, wondering how you got here and what's wrong with your life?
It's like a counter
That.
Okay. Any questions for Adam?
What's your favourite dinosaur?
What's your favourite dinosaur?
Ankylosaurus.
Oh, that one.
So what this was was a giant tank, basically. It was a 4-legged herbivore that was covered in scales, and its tail had a giant spiky club at the end of it. And
Sounds like Stegosaurus.
yeah, a little bit, but a little smaller and kind of just more tankish as opposed to angriness. And I like that animal because it's a herbivore, so it's pretty chill. But if anything messes with it, it's going down.
Cool. Any other questions from this side already? Oh yeah, we have a question.
Like the dragon one.
Yes.
If it flies, is it still a dinosaur?
Oh, contentious.
Yeah, you see, here's the thing. This is where the arguments and this is where the nitpicking comes into it. Apparently, they've gotten around that by saying it didn't fly. It only glided. It only glided around trees, which meant it didn't really fly, which meant it's still a dinosaur. Shh.
Did it breathe fire?
I hope so. Research is pending.
I'm gonna say yeah. No.
Yeah, okay.
Richard, you have a question.
Where do you stand on the warm-blooded thing?
Where do you stand on the
Why are
warm?
they warm-blooded?
Why are they
Does that
warm?
make it a dinosaur if it's not warm-blooded?
Yeah, that's the thing, which is, in recent years, the whole warm-blooded, cold-blooded thing itself has kind of fallen into disuse. They tend not to use those terms. It's does it take in heat, does it give out heat? Or is it somewhere in the middle for anything they can't work out, like dinosaurs? They say mesothermic, medium heat. They say some of them some of them are so big, there was so much stuff relative to how much heat they lost, that they probably could have regulated heat that way, and that's TRex. It's called gigantothermism. Because I love physics. I love words. And that's how sea turtles don't get too cold and die. So they don't know. Paleontology is so divided that I'm still reading and I have no idea. I reckon they're all just talking garbage.
Anybody else? Yes, there's one down the back, yes.
What's the biggest dinosaur?
What was the biggest dinosaur?
There's one they think it was a dinosaur. They've only got parts of it. and the parts of it look like a Brachiosaurus, but bigger. So they say that was probably the biggest saurus. It's quite aptly named Gigantosaurus.
Why?
But
Why?
they found a name tag.
I want to know what you're going to do with this information, Adam. You've clearly got this amazing second passion, and as somebody who, I'm like you straddle lots of different worlds. What are you going to do with this? You've got to keep talking about it. You've got to find an outlet for it.
Scream at random people in the street. Do they know about dinosaurs?
I know, but it's fascinating, isn't it? And I mean, it's lovely that you have this second passion. And is there any way that physics and paleontology could come together?
In like 4 universities around the world.
Yeah?
Yeah, there's a couple, like Phil Manning's group is mostly physicists and computer modelers.
Wow.
And there's another group in Kansas that are kind of the same. And that would be it. So if I want a job, I have 2 choices.
Sounds good to me. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, alright, we have a massive round of applause for Adam.